Creepy times ahead. Join us as we talk about the strange, the unknown, and the unexplained. Things that shouldn't happen, but do. If it's nighttime where you are, dim the lights, sit back, relax, and listen intently as we explore the edges of reality. Welcome to Paratalk.
Sounds like a lot of supernatural baloney to me.
Supernatural, perhaps. Baloney, perhaps not.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Paratalk. I'm Gareth Davies, and once again I'm joined by paranormal enthusiast Reeves Cooke. This week on Paratalk, we journey back through time and space to 1968 and America's involvement in the infamous Vietnam War. Apparently, there was some strange things going on back then that wasn't publicly revealed until many years later. We're talking about some very high strangeness during the Vietnam War. Hello, Reeves.
Hello, Gareth. Yes, weirdness. Much weirdness. Actually, if we think about it, during times of war, we go back many years, many centuries, there's always been weirdness. There's always been strangeness. And one side has always blamed the other side. And when they put the two things together, it's been neither. It's been something else. We can go back to, saying that, though, we do have places where it's been explained. So, for example, we had the 5th Norfolk Battalion in World War One that kind of marched into a cloud and disappeared, where it kind of transpires that they all got split up and picked off and killed. So,
yeah,
it kind of. But then again, we've got Caesar's 9th Legion. Where did they go? They kind of vanished. They kind of disappeared. Were they all killed? Were they all wiped out?
Also, the infamous Foo Fighters in World War II was and still is a giant mystery that people are ascribed to the UFO phenomenon. So I think you're right. I think most conflict, there is an aspect of the paranormal that bleeds in occasionally.
Well, it's interesting that you mention Foo Fighters, because this kind of fits in with this story that we've got here, which obviously most people know that the Vietnam War went on for like 20 odd years, and it finished in 1975, and there was I think it was something like 60,000 or maybe more of U.S. Military servicemen and others that were killed alone. So there was many more, obviously, but so that's a lot of people, and that's a long time for a conflict to go on. Now the thing is, this story goes back to 1968, the summer of 1968, when the conflict was really in full swing. And the US officials, those military men, they noticed that their pilots were coming to them and saying, "Hey, look, what's going on? There's some weird stuff going on here. We're out on patrol and we're getting buzzed by weird things, objects that we can't catch up with. We can't, we can't shoot at. They don't appear on our radar." As the other side as they being backed by some, by some military that are giving them money for these high-tech weapons or whatever, and it got a bit. They started scratching their heads, put it that way. So it was ordered that the US would increase their air patrols around there was a DMZ area, which is a demilitarized zone, and that was like a safe zone, and the aircraft weren't allowed in that area. It was that's a safe area, and these phenomenon were getting seen in and around this area. So it was decided that the patrols, the fighter aircraft would increase, and that there should be some evidence taken, that photographic evidence or anything that to show what this phenomenon was. And their pilots, obviously more planes, more pilots. They were fitted with onboard camera units and stuff like that, and they encountered this phenomenon, would buzz their aircraft. But every time that they would try and photograph it, it was outmaneuver them. It was unable to be photographed. It was as if it kind of knew what the Americans were trying to do. So, some sort of awareness. I don't know.
Yeah.
So they couldn't really sort of do anything. They couldn't really capture it. So it's kind of like one of those things where it's there, and it's a phenomenon, and it is there.
Were they able to get any photographs or any evidence of this phenomena?
Well, there was one incident. Well, a number of incidents, but one main incident where a pilot did pursue an object which he described as a glowing ball of light. He couldn't say if it was solid or not, just a large ball of light. He tried to photograph it, but it was, it just sped away. So he did actually pursue it, get it reasonably close to it, but it was, it was not able to be photographed because obviously it sped away.
Because I remember a lot of. Was in World War II with the Foo Fighters, there are one or two photographs of this phenomenon. It basically looks like a glowing ball of light that the Allies and the German forces would encounter over Europe during dogfights and the like. And as you said earlier, both sides thought it was the other that was using some strange technology.
Well, this is. I mean, up to this point, there was all it was. It was for kind of aerial phenomenon that would buzz aircraft, and it kind of eluded being captured on film, being photographed. It just kind of, it just wasn't, it wasn't able to be filmed or anything. But the incident's kind of changed. Some short time later, there was an incident with an Australian ship. The HMS AS Hobart, and that was attacked near a place called Tiger Island while it was tracking a number of unknown aerial targets. So the ships now were tracking these objects. They could see them on their radar. They were tracking them, and these objects, shall we say, made a pass on this ship, and there were a number of explosions on the ship. And it ended up killing 2 sailors and wounding 8 others. So it was kind of, shall we say, this came out later, but at the time it was kind of covered up as that it was a friendly fire incident, that American planes had mistakenly fired at these objects, with their rockets. They'd fired at them, and because the rockets couldn't lock on to the objects, they lost tracking, and then they would attract onto the ship and then come down and hit the ship. There's always propaganda in war. There's always people covering stuff up because they don't want you to know certain things. And I would likely be more against the fact that this was kind of a mini cover-up, so that people weren't getting worried that the other side have got some sort of superior weapon and that we're helpless. They're helpless against them. So
that's a really good point, though, as far as like friendly fire. If it was friendly fire, and then you could explain that away as some strange lights or some otherworldly event that's unexplainable, kind of takes the heat off you, killing your own people.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, it was kind of put down at the time as a friendly fire incident, and that what they saw, basically, the lights were basically rockets. So who knows? But there's another incident a short time after, which happened on a patrol boat. They have these patrol boats in Vietnam. They're like large gunboats that patrol the areas, and each of them has got their own number. This one at the time, which was under the command of Lieutenant Peter Snyder, was PCF-12, and basically it's a small motor launch. It's got a 50 caliber gun. It's got a larger gun, and I think some of them had torpedoes on them. I'm not sure. And it would do its patrols in and around the areas, just making sure things were all as they should be, and make sure there's no enemy in the area, and this patrol boat was out on. It was on, its nighttime patrol, and over the radio, they was heard another patrol boat that was, in a form of distress. This is patrol boat PCF 19. So it was basically saying that it had noticed some lights in the sky. The lights were following them, and they had been dive bombed, and that they'd lost the ability to steer, and that they needed some aid. They needed help. So obviously, this other patrol boat PCF 12 headed to the area where this other patrol boat was. When they got there, they noticed that the patrol boat was basically going around in a circle. So its rudder was locked, and it was just basically going around in a circle. And then they noticed in the sky these two large, glowing balls of light, and they were traveling together. And as they swooped down towards the patrol boat that was in distress, there would be when you put metal in a microwave and you get all the sparks and mini explosions. It's kind of that thing. There was no visual machine guns or rockets or anything. It was just explosions going off, and all around. It was also impacting the water around the boat as well. And the men on board, they didn't have any, because the boat was in a very highly damaged state. All they had was the arms. They had, their machine guns, and they were firing at these objects. But obviously, small arms fire wasn't really doing anything. So the patrol boat that was coming to their aid, they decided that they had a 50 caliber machine gun. They would shoot at these things to basically try and distract them. But as they started shooting, and they say that what they were shooting at, they felt they were hitting, but having no effect. So as they were shooting at these objects, hoping to get rid of, take the heat off the other patrol boat, the object swooped down again, and the patrol boat that was in aid, needed help, exploded.
Wow.
Now, it exploded. So everyone was blown overboard, and unfortunately, only two of the chaps survived from that patrol boat, which they picked up. And then they decided, at that moment, two jets came in, 4 Phantoms, I think. They came in, and they swooped the area. These lights then shot off. The jets went after the lights. So it was decided that they would get back to civilization, to land, as quickly as possible. So they turn and they go on their way as quickly as they can, only to look back and notice that these lights are now in pursuit of them. So obviously, you've got lights following you. You don't know what they are. You've just seen a patrol boat explode. It's all very science fiction.
It is,
and very strange as well.
No, these,
and also,
you're calling them, rather, they described them as lights, but there was no solid craft, or nothing discernible as an actual object. It was just purely a light. Is that correct? Up until the
point where they had their 50 caliber machine gun, which they had on their like a gun on their patrol boat, they decided to start shooting at these things. And the guy that was on the machine gun says that you could definitely hear the rounds hitting something metallic, but it was having no effect. And it wasn't until the jets that were coming back, basically these objects sort of went off and left them alone. So they were lucky in a way to have this encounter and not suffer the same fate as the other patrol boat. As to what the objects were, it's not. They're not the only ones that encountered this phenomenon. As a group of individuals, because after this event, there was another set of Army Rangers which were positioned in a different part of an area, which basically they were doing like a overwatch on a Viet Cong base, and it was their job to watch the base, see the movement, see what was going on, document it, so that they were just basically doing recon. And this was at night time, early in the morning. They noticed a a large glowing bluish white ball of light come over the area that they were watching. It hung there for a few minutes, and then it went down. There was small arms fire up from the area where the Viet Cong were.
They were shooting at it.
They were shooting at it, yeah. And then the Army Rangers say that this object kind of pulsated white light down onto the ground, and then they started to witness explosions and people screaming. And this went on for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then it all went quiet. And then this object, rose up into the sky and went on its way and went. They stayed there at their position, the Army Rangers, till morning, scouting the area, and then they decided to go down and inspect the village, the safe place where the Viet Cong was, and they found no one alive. But one of the strange things that they did see in the area was that anything like weapons and objects like that were melted, as if they'd been melted. So whatever that object was firing had the ability to melt stuff.
Well, this is very unusual for some kind of.
It's very bizarre. This is a very bizarre story, and it gets even more weirder.
Well, what's unusual though, Reeves, is for all encounters with UFOs, or if it is not a better term, unidentified flying objects, it's exceedingly rare to have these objects or lights or whatever they are fire or retaliate against any kind of aggression. There's been many cases where military jets have gotten very close to these objects, locked on their targeting, and were about to fire a missile or open fire with their guns, and everything's disabled. They're unable to fire. So the fact that in these cases they are able to not only fire at the craft, but apparently hit the craft, and then the craft retaliates and fires back is very, very unusual.
It definitely is, and the two incidents there are definitely verging on the edge of sci-fi. But we have another incident which happened 2 years later, which is 1970, and there was an Alpha team, which is like a special ops team, captained by William English. They were a 12-strong detachment of Green Berets who were stationed in Saigon. And William had instructions that he and his team were tasked on finding a lost B-52 bomber. And they were briefed that the pilots of the B-52 had encountered unknown objects which did not appear on their radars. Shortly after they'd put this radio message through to their HQ, the HQ lost all communication with the aircraft. They just gone silent. So the Williams team was tasked with going to its last known location and looking for this aircraft, retrieving, documenting what was there, retrieving any sensitive paperwork that it might find, and to destroy it because they didn't want the other side getting it. Anyway, so they they went to do their thing, to find this craft. They were dropped off, and it was obviously a very dense jungle, and they had to make their way through the jungle. And after lots of searching, they eventually found the craft. Now, here's the first weird thing: a number of members of the team noticed how different the area felt than the other parts of the jungle. How it had a strange oddness about it. They noticed.
Do they elaborate on that feeling? Do they get into like the feeling itself? No, not
really. No, there may well be more documented evidence out there. For the information I've got, no. I mean, all they do state is that the area had a strange feeling, strange vibe. Mm-hmm. The second thing that was strange was this B-52, which is an absolute massive aircraft. The only damage on it was its undercarriage. Okay. Now, if you could imagine a massive hulking aircraft like that had to crash land in a densely wooded area, there would be trees and bits of aircraft everywhere. But it was as if they thought to themselves that somebody had got this aircraft and just dropped it there.
Placed
I'm
it.
going to put that there. Placed it there.
So no broken tops of trees or anything as it came into crash land. It's as if it's just been dropped in a particular spot.
The plane was in near pristine condition, apart from its undercarriage and damage to the bottom of the aircraft.
Uh-huh.
Now, here's the next weird thing that the team encountered. All of the doors and compartments and anyway inside the aircraft were still all bolted tightly shut. So no one had left the aircraft because it was all still locked. They actually had to use a small charge to blow themselves in to the aircraft, to blow one of the locks so they could get in. So that's another weird thing. That means that whatever happened, that all the crew should still be in the craft.
Inside, yeah.
Yeah, and they were still in the craft, but they were deceased.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that made them feel strange was that all the crew, the pilots, all the navigator, and all the other people that are on the craft, I think it was how many? It's 6 people, I think. They were all still strapped in their seats with their gear on, their helmets on, all deceased. And it was as if they describe it as they'd been mauled by something. So they were scratched up and they were broken bones and stuff. So it was as if that
their injuries were not due to the crash, right?
No, they liken it to they had been savaged by something. So they had all scratch marks on them. There was also a strange lack of blood. For the injuries that they witnessed, they said that you would expect blood to be everywhere, and there wasn't.
Uh-huh.
There was a strange lack of blood, which was also another strange thing. So it was decided that William would break his team into two teams. And what they would do is Team 1 would go and rig the aircraft for detonation. They would rig all of its because they still had all of their stuff in the hold, all strapped down, all their cargo and stuff. It was still there. And there was nothing taken. So they was going to destroy the craft because they didn't want the Viet Cong getting anything to do with the craft. They also went through and got all the paperwork. They took all the dog tags from the deceased military personnel, and then they left and they made their way back across because they were obviously in enemy territory, so they had to make their way back across the lines. And obviously the craft was then
they blew up the craft.
Yeah, they exploded it. Yeah, and it was that was their job, and they had to take all the any paperwork back from the craft, that could have been deemed classified or sensitive. Now, so they'd done their job, and once they got back into Saigon, Captain William English, he submitted a full, no-nonsense report about everything that they'd witnessed, all the weirdness, all the strangeness. He gave it down to the word. He just like everything. This is what happened. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to make stuff up. This is what happened. Weird stuff happened, and everything. Within a very short time, he was removed from his command. They removed him, and they placed him on an air base in the UK at a desk job. So he'd lost his command. They put him on a desk job on an American base in the United Kingdom. So they moved him pretty much as far away as possible. Wouldn't
it be ironic if they put him into Bent Waters?
Yeah, well, it would be, yeah. But they moved him. And then here's another thing. Several months after his deployment to the UK, he was then informed. This is just a few months after his deployment. He's in the UK, and he gets a message. He's informed that the team that he was working with on that day had all been killed in an enemy attack, where they were all killed in an ambush.
Yeah.
Isn't that ironic? Isn't that strange?
It is.
That's so strange.
But it's kind of the MO also, though, because you notice that where if say, I don't know, a special forces unit or a commando unit or whatever, they do something that's shady, and they don't want that information to get out. I think you'll find that most, if not all of them, will meet an untimely death because they don't want to run the risk of information leaking out. So you just remove the people that were involved in the incident.
Well, English was angry about this. I mean, when he found this out, he thought to himself, we experienced something, we uncovered something, and now, this is weird how this is happening. So he decided that he went and started to talk to UFO researchers, and unknown to his then superiors, before he was he had copies of photographs that he'd taken when he was there. Now, where he got these, how he kept these photographs, I have no idea. But he had copies of the photographs when he documented the site. Yeah. And one of the people that he approached was Dr. Alan Hynek. He's one of the people that he approached with his story. And Alan Hynek, he thought it was a really interesting story because he said, let me tell you of a story. And he relayed to him a story of a Soviet ANP-2 craft that vanished from radar screens and was later found intact in dense woodland in Siberia.
Yeah.
So something very similar that what he had experienced. But in this case, no trace of the 4 crew were ever found.
Right.
So, the crew, it was only the aircraft that was there, but it was in good condition, and it was in dense woodland in Siberia. And you think if a plane crashes in dense woodland, there's bound to be wreckage. You know?
Absolutely. But now we should point out, or at least I'll bring it up, that Bill English, who you're talking about, in the late 80s to early 90s, he became associated with William Cooper, who wrote the book Behold a Pale Horse, very much into conspiracy. And everything you said, there's zero evidence for it ever happening. Now, that's not to say it didn't happen. It very well might have. But there is no evidence whatsoever, even up to the point where English reached out and corresponded with Hynek. Yeah. This is all told by English himself. He's saying this. Hynek, obviously Hynek is dead now, but at the time when he was alive, there was no corroboration from him saying, "Oh yes, I spoke to Bill English about it." There was nothing. This is all just him saying, "I did this, I did that," with zero evidence to back it up. Nothing. So it could all be completely true or completely nonsense.
It could be,
but it's a great story.
It is a great story, and obviously he also mentions that when he moved away and changed his name, he got a job in a TV station. Became an average Joe.
He says that he worked as a cameraman for the BBC. And there's zero evidence that ever happened. And when you think about this, for somebody who could become a cameraman, working in a professional career as a cameraman, they're not just going to hire someone with zero experience in doing that. So once again, could it be true? Sure, of course.
Yeah. That's the thing with these accounts. It does sound like it's straight out of a science fiction book. And a lot of these UFO cases that we cover, I always think that if they are, we take Bob Lazar, for instance. A lot of people say, he's just made it all up and it's all a lot of nonsense because we can't find any proof that he was there or he was there or he did this or he did that. I think that government is very clever at destroying people's social presence. But then again, we've got to be careful when we listen to stories like with the UFO. Like this story is it would make a great film.
Yeah, it's a great story.
I do think, I really think that something like you could read this and you could make like the Predator film. You really could, because it's very similar, sort of army and it's in the jungle. Yeah. And when we read stuff like this, it's like, well, is there any truth in it? If there is truth in it, what part of it could be true? Well, we do know that in conflicts there are things that go on that can't be explained.
Absolutely,
because it's just unknown phenomenon, and there are many witnesses to it. But in this case, I'm certainly on the fence with this story, definitely. But I find it fascinating. I just find it a whole fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. I mean, whether it's true or not, it's still a great story. No question.
It is. Oh, it definitely is. It is a great story. But did they? I mean, did they try to kill him? I mean, he would say that people tried to assassinate him. Who knows?
Yeah.
That people shot at him when they drove by on motorbikes and shot at him. But once again, there are people out there that have told UFO stories, and they've ended up dead.
Uh-huh.
And do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
There's plenty of people out there that have spoke about government conspiracy and UFOs and the whatnot, and they end up in a car crash, or they end up, they've suicided themselves somehow.
Yeah.
So, a great story, but once again, a little bit on the fence by it, but still, it's a great story. Is it true?
Who knows? I would recommend for any listeners who are interested in this story to do some Google searching and make up your own mind. But true or not, it's still a great story. Thanks again, Reeves. Really appreciate it. And we'll be back very soon with some more Paratalk.